Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Whether one is the narrator, the foe, the main character, the hero, or just the supporting cast, all parties involved are imperative to the story being told. The purpose of this speech is to inform my audience of the people that inspired the Alexander Hamilton legacy and the musical. For the first point, I would like to refer back to the opening quote. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Who lives? Well, the times of the American Revolution, of which Alexander Hamilton played a huge role, were often violent and ruthless. Some who lived are Thomas Jefferson. You may know him as the third president of the United States of America and one of our founding fathers. Thomas Jefferson was played in the musical by David Diggs. David Diggs also played Marquis de Lafayette. Marquis de Lafayette was known as the America's favorite fighting Frenchman. He was key in the American Revolution. When David Diggs portrayed Lafayette, his hair was up. And this is a symbolic reference to throughout the play throughout the musical, where when your hair is up, you are fighting or telling a story. When he was playing Thomas Jefferson, his hair was down, and this is apparent throughout the musical. There are a couple of characters who actually do that. Hercules Mulligan was also one of the characters who lived. He was played by Oak Onadolwin. Hercules Mulligan was actually a British tailor, and he was a spy during the Revolution. So he was key and also one of the fortunate ones who lived throughout the Revolution. If they weren't involved in the sharing of this story or considered those who lived, they must have been the ones who died. Some of those characters would be John Lawrence, who was played by Anthony Ramos. Anthony Ramos actually also played another character who died, which would be Philip Hamilton, the firstborn of Alexander Hamilton. Just like David Diggs did with Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson's characters, Anthony Ramos also played a character who both died, and when Lawrence was fighting, he was wearing his hair down. He was wearing it up. When Philip, the son, was in a duel, he also had his up. So it's just that symbolism carrying on throughout. Obviously, if you don't know, now you know. Alexander Hamilton died in a duel with Amber Murr. These two had a long, outgoing conflict, complicated relationship. They started as friends. They often were fighting neck and neck with each other. They had opposing views on several subjects. Alexander Hamilton was played by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Lin wrote and directed the entire play. He's a very talented person. And when in the first act, Alexander Hamilton is fighting in the American Revolution, again, his hair is up. When in the second act, Alexander Hamilton is wearing his hair down. He is no longer actively fighting in the Revolution. John Lawrence was killed by the British Army. The revolution was already over. The British had already surrendered, but he was still killed by British troops. Philip Hamilton was killed in a duel, just like his father years later would be. He was killed by a man named George Eaker, who was a fellow student, and they just didn't see eye to eye. This was back when you could duel to fight. While some of the unsung heroes of this story are those involved in battle, some were not. To have been present and involved during the birth of the nation that would be named the United States of America, there are a few individuals that we can thank for being those who told the story. Again, we're referring back to who lived, who died, who tells your story. One of those who lived would be Angelica Schuyler. Angelica Schuyler was the sister of Eliza. Eliza married Alexander Hamilton. Angelica and Eliza both, again, wore their hair down at the beginning in Act 1 when there was fighting going on, when it was during the Revolution. After the Revolution, both of their hair is up. They are the ones telling the story. They are the ones who lived to tell the story. Another one who lived was George Washington. George Washington was played by Christopher Jackson. Angelica Schuyler was played by Renee Goldsberry, and Eliza Schuyler was played by Philippa Sue. If it were not for these three, the story of Alexander Hamilton and those involved may not have been recorded so accurately. This was in a time of writing letters, so Alexander and Eliza had much correspondence, and so did Alexander and Angelica. The play, the musical, is called Hamilton, so you would think that it is solely about Alexander Hamilton. But one of the main characters is Eliza Schuyler Hamilton, his wife. She fought alongside George Washington. They wrote articles about slavery. They told the story. Eliza opened the first orphanage in New York City. Eliza was Hamilton. Hamilton was not just Alexander, but everyone involved in his story. By using the lyrics in trendy and informative ways, the Hamilton musical is instrumental in teaching those who may not be history professionals like myself, but I do love a good song. During the correspondence between Alexander and Aaron Burr, when they were discussing the duel, they both signed off A. Hamilton or A. Murr. If you've seen the musical, you know. If you haven't, please watch it. It's amazing. But you'll catch it in the musical. They both sign off A. their last name. Well, my name is Amber Murr, and I would like to say that I have the honor to be your obedient servant, A. Murr.